Hi, Eric.
Hey, Aaron.
Hey, happy New Year almost.
Pretty much, real close, possibly by the time anyone hears this.
That's right. It's good to see you in person, even though we tried to do a recording in the same room, but we don't know how microphones work enough.
Yeah.
So
Or we've
you're,
been unwilling to spend sufficient money on microphones.
yeah, so you're in my house, but we ended up having to move you to a separate room, and it kind of defeated the whole purpose of you
Yeah.
coming over.
Yep.
So today we're going to do kind of a quick hit style show for the end of the year, right? What I've got open in front of me is our list of episodes, and we've been kind of building up feedback from listeners and from discussions offline. And I think we have just stuff to say about our past, our past shows, just kind of a follow-ups and corrections or additions or whatever, right?
We'll find out.
Let's start with our lovely alphabet. Episode 4.2, we talked about the deseret alphabet. That one's pretty recent.
We did. Yeah. I think everything we said is still true.
Everything is good there. Nope. But we got some great feedback from one of our Discord listeners that I wanted to share. And this is a great place to put in. So Discord is a great place to put stuff for if you want to feedback to us, right? This is from Kent. Kent said that he was surprised that we didn't cover the use of the deseret alphabet as a test alphabet for Unicode, which is why it's included. They needed an alphabet that no one would complain about if Unicode messed it up. So we talked about Unicode and how the alphabet is permanent now because it's in there. But yeah, if you go in and read these old papers that talk about why it was added to the Unicode, it is an excellent way to test if your machine is rendering fonts properly.
Yeah, I had no idea that was true.
So there you go.
I had never heard that before.
Extra bit of trivia. And Todd from Discord also provided some PDF files in the show notes from papers from this era if you want to look more into it. It's pretty cool. Okay, what's next?
Well, do you want to do some of the finance stuff?
Yeah, okay, so let's go ahead and revisit our season 1 episode, Debts and Outlays. There was a statement from the church in 2018 on about its finances. There we covered a common consent article called LDS Inc., right? And then we talked about money as debt. And the idea was to talk about how the church uses its money. But what we haven't talked about is what happened in when was this? Early the whistleblower, December 2019.
Oh, it's just before the pandemic.
Yep, December 2019, a whistleblower claims that the LDS Church stockpiled $100 billion in charitable donations and dodged taxes. This is in the Salt Lake Tribune.
You can't dodge. Okay, that's dumb, but go ahead.
Go ahead. No, you go first.
Well, I mean, a church can't dodge taxes. Like, that's not really how it works.
Yeah, so this happened after we recorded our finance episode, and we've never gone back to it. And I think it's relevant.
Oh, what's also kind of relevant to this in a way is the recent news that the Utah legislature is counting all the money the church spends on welfare towards their federal requirements to spend money on welfare. Did you read about that?
No, go ahead.
Well, that's essentially the summary. There's a loophole in federal law where states and a number of conservative states do this, not just Utah, can count church welfare expenditures towards the state's total in order to qualify for federal whatever.
Huh. And is that going away, or?
Well, it's controversial now that people are paying attention to it, but I doubt it's going away.
Okay.
Because it's very difficult to change anything of that sort at the federal level.
So the original report came out in the Washington Post. Let's see, this was released on December 17th, 2019. A former investment manager alleges in a whistleblower complaint to the IRS that the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints has amassed about $100 billion in accounts intended for charitable purposes. The confidential document, received November 21st, accuses church leaders of misleading members and possibly breaching federal tax rules by stockpiling their surplus donations instead of using them from charitable works. And so the idea is that we have this huge portfolio in stocks and bonds, right? Properties and things, that the total amount of it adds up to $100 billion. And none of it is used for the kind of expenses that you would expect
Yeah.
the church to be using. So, which includes building new buildings, running missions, and doing welfare, that kind of thing. And it was a bit of a bombshell.
Yes, it was. I'm gonna share a link with you. This fellow, Sam Brunson, is a tax attorney. He is an expert in tax law, and he has written about the church and taxes a number of times.
So this came out like a week after
Yeah.
the actual whistleblower article.
Mm-hmm.
The name of the fund is Ensign Peak Advisors. This article is from 2019, December 17th, by Sam Brunson, and it's on the website by common consent, right?
Yes, it is.
What,
And the thing about Sam Brunson, I followed him on Twitter for a while, is he is actually an expert on a lot of stuff that people love to talk about without being expert in. And in a similar way in which it is helpful to listen to epidemiologists when discussing a pandemic rather than your Uncle Joe.
mm-hmm.
The same thing is true when it comes to issues like the church and taxes. If listening to a tax attorney / tax professor is a pretty good idea. So he is a law professor specializing in taxes. The reason that I brought up Sam at this point is because it is a little absurd to suggest that the church is somehow violating tax law by putting all this money together. That doesn't mean that it's an ethical choice or the correct choice or the New Testament choice or anything else. $100 billion is a lot of money. So a lot of the moral questions remain intact. Just because it's legal doesn't mean it's right.
I mean, I feel like we haven't described the problem well enough yet. All right.
No, I don't think anybody, well, maybe not nobody, but we haven't, certainly.
So the church takes in, some number of billions of dollars in tithing or whatever, right?
Mm-hmm.
Per year. And we spend some of that, right? The temples are expensive to maintain and build. We fund, ward campouts and that kind of thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
But this is just something else. I mean, the magnitude of difference between some number of billions and 100 billion is such a big number. And as far as we know, the church ain't doing nothing with it, right?
Yeah, just letting it grow.
We're just letting it grow. Some of these are stocks like in Apple and Microsoft and Google, or Google Alphabet. And some of them are actual holdings like land in Florida, things like that. And it all just adds up to a portfolio of worth a lot of money, right? Okay, so yes, I agree. These articles by Sam Brunson are good. And I think his arguments that the church is above board in its legality in doing in having this money and holding this money, that makes sense, right?
Right.
I'm looking at an August 21st, 2021 article by Sam Brunson, also on common consent. And it says, let's talk about money, right? His opening statement is, I don't have any idea if 100 billion is a good amount for the church to have in its endowment. Personally, I tend to think, given its revenue and expenditures, that the number is high. At least as long as it continues to bring in a significant amount of tithing annually. It feels to me that it doesn't need a quick cushion quite this big. But the thing is, I don't know. Church leaders are completely opaque into how they've made their investment and spending decisions. And to be honest, I suspect that it has been a decision only in the loosest sense. Inertia is a powerful force, and decisions made 20 years ago carry a lot of weight. So this is where I wanted to take this conversation. yes, we don't know why the church has this much money. And yes, it seems to make sense that if the church has this much money, that we should be spending it on things that we have. And it is a real barrier to, I think, missionary work, and to anybody that knows about this story is going to have a really hard time like writing a tithing check, or volunteering for service projects that only benefit the church, like cleaning the church on Sundays, for example. And when we have this kind of nest egg. So I just think that we need some context here. And this is going to sound a bit apologetic, but I wanted to put the pros and the context on the side of things. All right. Let's remember where the church was 50 years ago. Right. And since this is a quick hits episode, recall that not too long ago, we did an episode on the building program, right? Which was one of my absolute favorite episodes that we've ever done. We talked about how the church kind of ran out of money.
Yeah.
That was in the 50s, right?
Right. We're just barely past the generation of apostles who were there. Just barely.
Are we?
The last 10 years.
Yeah.
Russell M. Nelson wasn't called as an apostle until the 80s. And he's our senior apostle. But we had apostles who were there as recently as 10 years ago.
Okay.
People who were junior apostles at the time.
And let's not forget how far back our shared church trauma goes for money.
Right. We have a deep and genetic worry of, let's remember that Lorenzo Snow really pushed tithing because the church was in debt. And tithing was originally instituted in part to pay debts. That's what tithing was expressed for. And it's a law forever. I'm paraphrasing another Sam Brunson article right now, but it's a law the Doctrine and Covenants says is a law that's for us forever, but we're not using it for the original purposes that tithing was instituted for. So it raises a lot of interesting questions about what is tithing for, and what is the money for? And frankly, and I know I said this in our previous episode back in 2018, but the Doctrine and Covenants really seems to suggest that our finances should be very transparent, and they aren't. And I think a lot of these problems would be lessened if there was more transparency. Transparency is not exactly the same thing as honesty, but a lack of transparency feels a lot like a lack of honesty, even if it's not the same.
That's great. I'm going to keep quoting here from Sam. All right. Arguably, the church should communicate its financial thinking better. And I don't mean that the church needs to tell members exactly how much it has in assets, though it certainly could. But I believe that if the church viewed members as stakeholders, it could and would communicate its thinking to us. What consideration has it made in deciding whether to spend or invest? How did it decide how much it needed for current expenditures and for future expenditures? All right.
If we are Zion, we should be more like a co-op, right? We do all have a stake.
That's right. I thought that phrasing of it as stakeholders is really interesting. When I give tithing to the church, I assume that money's gone, right? I'll never see it again, and I have no idea what it's going to be used for.
Yeah.
When I give fast offerings to the church, I know that those are spent locally first. And because I was a finance clerk, which is one of the focuses of that episode 1.8 or 1.3, I know how we spent our fast offerings in the Berkeley ward. I knew like we spent some on counseling, and we spent some on rent, and we spent some on food, and that was really nice to see that money go by, right? That was transparency. The details of who got those benefits are, of course, anonymous, and they are confidential. So the church could never say stuff like that. But what it could say is how much it's doing and what it's going to be spending this money on. I want to quote Sam a bit more. I think there would be a lot of power in church leaders saying, we believe that we need to have a cushion for the next 100 years. Based on our projections, we believe that, as in Alma's day, the church is going to grow primarily among the poor. While we have positive revenues today, we have projected that in 20 years, we'll be operating at negative cash flow. We debated tapping into our endowment now to reduce tithing or feed the hungry or something else, but we believe that these future needs will be more compelling. right? Imagine if the church put out a statement like that.
Yeah.
It would completely obviate.
It would change the conversation.
Yeah, I mean, this conversation would be over. And personally, that's my internal belief that that's what's happening, that the church is thinking pretty far afield. I like this comment about Alma's day, right? And here Sam is quoting Alma 32. And what happens in Alma 32?
Those are the poor of the Zoramites. That is not where I was guessing he was. I was thinking he was thinking of Alma Senior. But scripture is full of examples of the poor faithful.
That's right.
Poor and faithful seems to be a natural state of affairs.
And so that's why it's interesting to see articles from prominent church members saying, I don't pay tithing and I won't until the church does something about this.
Yeah.
I don't know that I necessarily agree with that. I respect where they're coming from, right?
I think it's probably a counterproductive stance. The church hates being bullied into things. But I will say that for the first time in my life, after that news came out, I had a hard time paying tithing.
Uh-huh.
Never a difficult commandment, like super easy. I don't care that much about money. It's easy come, easy go. But for the first time, I was like, what is going on here? I was forced to like think about it more. And a lot of people did the same thing and decided not to.
You know, I taught a lot of people the gospel when I was in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil in 1997 through 99. A lot of them were poor, right? And a lot of them accepted the gospel. And it was a joyful experience when somebody did. As part of that teaching, I went through 6 discussions, and you went through the same discussions on your mission. And it's not until discussion number 5 where we even talk about tithing, right? We go through several commandments. By the time discussion 5 comes around, you've talked about Joseph Smith, and you've talked about the Book of Mormon, and you've talked about, the gospel, the restoration of the priesthood, and so forth, eternal families. And the people have been to church, and a lot of time they're feeling like they're going to get baptized, and they're excited about it. I had exactly 0 people on my mission have any problem with tithing. 0. Mm-hmm. We taught them the principle. We said it's 10%. They're like, you got it. We had problems with smoking, with the law of chastity, people not being married. We had problems with, being lazy, not wanting to go to church on Sundays. 0 people had a problem with tithing. Now, that's just my personal experience, but people understand that you get what you pay for.
My personal experience, yeah. I was just going to say that my personal experience is too small of a sample size. I taught maybe 3/5 discussions in my entire mission.
Oh, there you go.
so I don't feel qualified to draw generalities.
Brazil was a different place than Korea, if I remember right.
Korea, yes.
So I agree with all the people that say this is an issue and it really deserves discussion, and transparency is really important.
You know what I think the problem might be is that we spend a lot of time in church agonizing over the call to sacrifice everything, sell everything and follow me, that sort of call, like Zion, have everything in common among us. You were just agonizing earlier today about moving into a larger house.
Yeah.
I think this agony is something we as thoughtful readers of scripture necessarily grapple with. And the church is not the same as a member, but it feels to have $100 billion stored away feels like not something a person should not do. And if it's something an individual Christian should not do, it's a little, there's that disconnect between, a member is not the same thing as the church, but, principles are principles. And I think that's where the disconnect is coming from. Like if a person was doing what the church is doing, it would be wrong.
Yeah, I think that's true.
And so that's why we need more transparency and explanation.
Yeah, that's kind of how I feel about it. I would like this to be addressed. And it hasn't been. It's been 2 years. Now, to be fair,
it has been, but weekly.
Distracted.
Yeah, the church, Sam Brunson, new friend of the show.
Welcome aboard, Sam.
and he gave, there's a tweet that I was just looking at a minute ago, and I'm not going to be able to find now, but he was responding to the church's response to what had been said, like to the article after it dropped. And it was basically it was the church had a series of press releases, and Sam's main takeaway was that these aren't addressing the actual problems. The church in those talked about how many billions it's given away to charity, which is true. But giving away liquid money at the rate of about $64 million a year or something, I think it worked out to, is not the same as having a $100 billion slush fund that is going unused. So the church didn't really address the difficulties with the $100 billion. I'll find that and we'll add it to the show notes so you can see what Sam said about that.
Okay, that sounds great. Should we just, as we end this semi-quit hit, mention the Good Shepherds? Dear listener, someone wrote a musical about this, and it's available. You can go listen to songs from it.
In the process of being put on in Ogden. So
yeah, it's called the Good Shepherds, and they're what's fun about their website is on their about page, which we'll put in the show notes. They cite a bunch of articles as sources. So about the show, The Good Shepherd, this is on thegoodshepherds.net. The Good Shepherds is an immersive musical journey centered around humanity and redemption, and how hoarding unimaginable wealth takes tragic precedence over human needs, especially within ultra wealthy Christian churches. The projection, and then the summary is new recruits at Mormon Inc. get a taste of endless cash. And then there's a bunch of sources, including these whistleblower stuff and more recent sources. So anyway, it's there. You can listen to a few of the songs if you'd like.
I just want to say that this is not an endorsement. There are very few musicals I like to start with, and I have no reason to believe that this one will make me like it more. I was fascinated to read about this on the Washington Post, and it comes from a story like the ones we've been telling about. A good lifelong tithing paying member of the church ran into some financial difficulties, needed help paying his mortgage, and his bishop, after examining his finances, decided $40 for food was all he needed. And this was just a couple months before the $100 billion news broke. My understanding is this fellow is still an active member, and he doesn't feel that there's anything attacking the church in his musical. It's just trying to question the idea of having $100 billion. Can't really speak to the story itself. There are 5 songs online, but I don't think the script is available. And if you go see it in Ogden, let us know.
Next quick hit. Any follow-ups to Minerva Taychart and the Manti Temple?
Oh, yes. Yes. Thank you for asking. So that worked out great. The murals are being preserved. But the church, in my opinion, learned the wrong lesson. The church learned the lesson that things that are beloved deserve to be preserved. And I think that's true. But I think that there was a secondary lesson, which was just as important, which is that themes that were built from love and from care and from great symbolic intent deserve to be preserved. Now, a few years back, the Ogden Temple was essentially destroyed and turned into another boring, shiny box with pointy parts.
I just want to jump in here.
Yeah.
Temples are beautiful, regardless of what shape it's in.
You can be beautiful and boring at the same time.
Okay.
And now the plan is to do the same thing to Provo. Provo's already been bowdlerized by painting it white and putting an angel Moroni on top. But Ogden and Provo, in my opinion, are 2 of the most interesting temples that there are. They're worth looking at. And I understand that even 50 years later, some people are like, it's ugly, but I think that's more because that's like a Utah meme, is to make fun of the Provo temple. It's not because it's true. The temple is beautiful. It was designed so that its form would follow its function, and its form is based on Old Testament symbolism of, the fire by night and the pillar by day. They're beautiful temples, in my opinion. And now the plan is to build a box around Provo also. Why? Well, the church, one of the stated reasons is because not enough people take their wedding photos in front of the Provo temple, which I think is one of the most nonsensical reasons to change the temple ever. I wrote a letter to the same people I wrote a letter to about the Tyke art murals, and I don't think anybody else has. I think that we only appreciate things that are generally agreed to be beautiful and not things that were built out of love and sacred dedication. And I think it is a tragedy that Provo is going the way Ogden is. And I don't think I can win it because it's not pretty enough to most people. And I just think that valuing prettiness is not a great value. The fact that the Provo temple is a powerful symbol should be enough. Your thoughts?
Well, I appreciate you tilting against this particular windmill. Is that the right analogy? Not sure it is.
Well, it is if I am a fool.
Kicking
And
against
I
this
probably am.
kicking against this particular prick, kicking against the, isn't that a
Oh, I
scriptural
don't
thing?
like that one because that suggests that I'm in the wrong,
Okay, what
and
about
I'm not in the wrong.
there's got to be a better analogy. Well, I appreciate you fighting this good fight. How about that?
Yeah, thanks.
I've always thought it was a weird looking temple.
And that's fine. Like, there's nothing. Why is weird bad? We're one of the weirdest churches out there.
It is true.
We should have at least one temple that reflects that instead of a bunch of temples that just try to emphasize our prettiness.
Next quick hit. Let's talk about The Devil Went Down to Berkeley. This is episode 2.6. Okay, what do you think our conclusion was from that one?
I remember the title, but I don't remember what we talked about. Was that when we talked about Satan and we went through the use of terms over the years? And
Yep. We talked about how there's just lots of references to El Diablo in conference talks, right? And the statement is one of the conclusions that we came to was that we wish that wasn't the case.
yeah, I'm no big fan. I was just reading a book review of a new biography of John Milton in the Atlantic last night, and it was interesting to me. Like, I teach it. That's an overstatement. I don't teach Paradise Lost. I bring up Paradise Lost when I teach AP Lit to high school students, and we talk about it briefly, and I have them read about 40 lines, and we talk about how charismatic the character of Satan is, and how delightful and attractive he is. But this book review put it into a context I hadn't really thought about before. Milton starts writing Paradise Lost after his political career has demolished, after he's been released from prison, after he has gone blind. And the first few books of Paradise Lost are Satan flying and being joyful and being awesome, and why he's one of the great characters in English literature. And then Milton spends the rest of Paradise Lost dragging him down and making him fit into a more into a smaller box. And the comparison made in the book review, which I believe therefore came from the book under review, is that Milton found himself identifying with Satan. He had flown too high and needed to be punished with blindness and homeboundness and so forth. And I had a point. Let's see if I can recall it now. Essentially, my kids have just, that's not fair. My youngest son has just started showing his younger sister Gravity Falls.
Ooh,
which I know is a family favorite.
Love that show.
And we just watched the episode where Mabel dates a bunch of gnomes.
That's early in the first season.
That's yeah. We just started like a couple days ago. And she is hoping that the person she's dating is a vampire. Her brother fears it's a zombie. Gravity Falls comes out around the time of Sexy Vampires. But the thing is, Sexy Vampires is sort of, that's an ongoing idea that goes back a long time. It predates Twilight for sure. It predates Anne Rice.
And I'm a big fan of it.
There's something very attractive about evil. The the devil is sometimes very attractive in art. Same thing with vampires. And maybe that's a reason not right there is enough reason not to be citing the devil all the time.
Well, listen, I'm a big fan of sexy vampires, but not of Twilight. I mean, I should say that. But the Magic the Gathering, the most recent set is called Crimson Vow, and it's about a vampire wedding, and the art is just knock you on your keister good. I mean, you're into all to Mormon art. I like art from Magic the Gathering. But my point is that I agree with you, but I'm wondering, okay, so everything you said was great, right? We shouldn't be identifying with we shouldn't be identifying with the devil. That makes sense to me.
Yes, thank you for summing that up, because I had a really hard time arriving at my point.
But the more I look back at that episode, the more I just question whether we were right to begin with, because I haven't seen it slowing down at all. People talk about the adversary in conference talks all the time, and I hear about it in churches, in church talks, even in our local ward, right?
I feel like since we made the episode, the devil has come up more in Berkeley Ward sacrament meetings than it did previously.
Right.
That could be the same event as buying a white Toyota Corolla and then realizing everyone owns a white Toyota Corolla.
But I just wonder, is it possible that we're wrong here? And that's what I want to question.
Should we talk more about the devil?
Is mentioning the fact that we believe in a literal adversary, right? Who we can blame for some of our mistakes. That's the wrong way to say it.
I'll say something controversial that can go on the t-shirt.
Okay.
Satan is very much like Heavenly Mother.
Oh, okay.
And what I mean by that is we know Satan exists. We don't really know very much about him. And so kind of everything we say is speculation designed to meet our needs.
Uh-huh.
We really don't know much about Satan canonically. With some history, sure. But how he behaves in the day-to-day, I mean, other than if somebody shows up and offers to shake your hand and you don't touch them, like, we don't know much about how the devil, can he read your thoughts? Most people would say no, but is that canon? No, it's not canon. We don't know. He's a mystery. And unlike Heavenly Mother, I'm not sure it's super valuable to spend a lot of time making stuff up.
Well, I don't think I have a good answer yet, but what I'm doing is I am willing to think more about it. I think that if we never had a sacrament meeting talk where the adversary was mentioned, that I could be happy living in that universe, right?
Sure, I wouldn't miss him.
But I'm willing to concede that there might be some value in it on occasion. I don't know if the rate at which we get it is the right rate. Which isn't a lot. I mean, we're not a fire and brimstone kind of congregation.
No.
We mostly talk about Christ and stuff like that.
He's not a starring character.
No, it's pretty rare. But my question is more like any. Okay, that's all I have on that quick hit. Just an admission of doubt.
Well, I will make one more thing to say. And I will do this in my dual role as a member of the Berkeley Ward and as editor of Irreantum. In Irreantum's second to last issue, Joe Smith and the Devil, which is inspired by the literary work by Parley P. Pratt, which takes that name, I asked a number of artists to respond to that writing of Pratt's. And a former member of our ward, Roxy Rawson, currently back in her native across the pond.
Oh, is she? I was missing Roxy. I was missing Roxy.
Yeah, she moved back. But anyway, she recorded, her original plan was, well, she went through a number of plans, but for a while it looked like she was going to record a version of the Rolling Stones' Sympathy for the Devil. And that's essentially what she ended up doing, but it's largely her personal story of being a member of the church and not always being treated super well by fellow members. So I'd recommend that to people looking for some more thinking on the devil. The link we put in the show notes will be for the entire issue. It's not a very long issue, so check it out. And if you're into Mormon devil stuff, it's a good place to expand what's possible. And if you're done with the devil, don't touch it.
Well, I'll definitely check it out. I mean, I feel like we should have an update on Christopher Columbus, but I'm not sure what to say. Black Lives Matter, that stuff.
Yeah. So the White Horse prophecy is historically nonsense. Like, it's not real. The idea that the Constitution will hang by a thread and a Mormon elder will save it is a bogus prophecy. But there's no doubt that it's sunk pretty deep into American Mormon culture.
So it's worth refreshing our our understanding of what you're talking about.
So yeah, so there's this non-existent prophecy. It's sort of, I don't know. It's the Mormon equivalent of, I don't know. I don't want to say the protocols of the elders of Zion, because that's like straight up horrible. This is a fairly harmless example, but it's something there's no historical backing for it, and yet it just sticks around. The idea that the Constitution will hang by a thread, a Mormon elder will save the Constitution. A lot of this came up in the news when Mitt Romney was running for president. A lot of it came up in the news when Mitt Romney voted to impeach or to convict, what was that guy's name? Donald Trump.
Yeah.
How lovely to forget it for a moment. But yeah, it's not a real thing. However, we are at a stage in American history right now where the Constitution arguably is hanging by a thread. I mean, not yet, but we'll see what happens in a couple of years. State legislatures are systematically stripping away people's rights. There's a lot of straight up talk about, like, it's, elections only matter if they go the right direction. And there's a lot of systems being put in place to make sure that they do go the right direction. If the Constitution has ever been in danger, I'll give you like a fun little phrasing that I read recently, that even with the Civil War, which I think we can all agree was a pretty bad time for American democracy, even with the Civil War, people recognized that Abraham Lincoln won the election. Nobody doubted that. That's why they left the country, is because he won. So our crisis is a unique one, and there isn't really precedent for it. And democracies are fragile. They fall apart all the time. And I would like to know what we as American Latter-day Saints are really willing to do to save the Constitution. I mean, are we going to give our kids and our grandkids American democracy, or are we going to exist like Putin's state? I mean, Putin's main argument is that democracy is messy and people are unhappy under it, and people are happier under an autocracy. And this isn't a crazy idea that is a fringe idea. For instance, I was just watching Film Theory the other night, and there's a film theory. Are you familiar with that YouTube channel, Aaron?
I love Film Theory.
Yeah, so there's one episode about how the empire is the best form of government of all the ones that are seen in the movies. And
of Star Wars, I presume.
Right, of Star Wars. And the argument essentially is that that's when things, as a normal citizen, things were smoothest. There was less chaos. And this is the basic argument of a modern autocrat, is that autocracy is simpler and safer, and you will be more comfortable than you would be under democracy, where you have to worry about things and things are chaotic and things are always at risk of changing. Autocracy is safe. Autocracy is simple. This is, speaking of the devil, this sounds very much like the devil's plan. This sounds very much like the sort of thing the Book of Mormon warns us against. And we are, slouching our way to that eventuality. So I don't know exactly what the story is, but as far as updating our Black Lives Matter episode, well, making sure people can vote is a good way to demonstrate that you care about people's lives. We could go back to the church cleaning thing. You only barely mentioned that in passing. I know you have more to say about that. Now would give it some circularity.
Well, the only comment I had about it was in regard to the how difficult it is for me at the moment to justify giving up a Saturday morning to go clean the church, knowing of this endowment that the church has of $100 billion, right? When my Saturday mornings aren't too common. I have to work on Saturday a few times a year, and my kids don't ever want to get up that early, and I'm not getting paid, right?
No, and frankly, like, I think it was a good thing when the church paid for custodial work. There are people I know personally in our ward who used to be paid to clean the church. My own mother did that for a few years, was a church custodian. And I think there's a lot of value to that. I think the reason it was taken away, I mean, the stated reason is it's good for church members to have the opportunity to volunteer and work together and perform service, and sure. I think another unstated reason was, much like members of our ward often complain about facilities management, and it's not, our ward is not unique in that, but our building makes us feel a little more hoity-toity maybe. But we kind of complain about the professionals in charge of our church buildings because they end up feeling like they own them more than we do. And I think that maybe trying to get rid of that feeling in wards was possibly another unstated reason for that. But ultimately, the number of stories that I know personally of families who survive difficult times through church employment working as custodians is significant. It seems honestly like a really good way for the church to support the community is to pay people to clean the church. I think we should consider bringing it back. It's not that big of an expense.
I mean, one of the reasons to volunteer your time, right, is to serve something. And it is nice on the Sunday after I do clean the church, which is only a couple times a year, but to walk through the halls and just feel a sense of happiness that I was able to contribute to how nice this meeting is. And that's not worth nothing. I mean, that's definitely valuable, but I don't know that the benefit of that feeling outweighs losing a Saturday morning with my family. I don't know. I'm not sure how to say this. I mean, I gotta say, it feels like I'm complaining about something that doesn't matter, but and I'm happy to do it. Yeah, the only reason I thought about bringing it up was that I have to say, the idea of the church needing this kind of service now is laughable.
Sure.
And there are lots of people who do need service, right? So that's kind of where I'm coming from it.
We have limited hours that people are willing to dedicate to service, and maybe burning them up on cleaning the church is not the best use of them.
It's just interesting. I don't know that I have much more to say about that.
I don't know what my opinion is either. I largely think that cleaning the church is a good thing. I think it's good for members to feel that connection to the building, and it's because building is a symbol of community, and so building a connection to the building builds your community with each other, especially if you're all in it together. I'm curious what other people have to say, which is a good reason for this to be the last one we do, because I imagine pretty much everybody has an opinion on this. And possibly just as poorly formed as our own.
Okay, you said it was the last one, but I want to comment one more thing.
Okay,
what are you really happy about for this New Year's in the church?
For the church? Oh, that's an interesting question.
Like, what are you excited about for the next year?
I have an idea on reimagining ministering, which I am going to pitch to the stake president this month. I was just going to do it, but I have a meeting with him, so I'm going to pitch it first. And I think it's safe to say that ministering is pretty broken. From what I understand,
the ministering program.
Yeah, it's just not working. Home teaching, for all its problems, at least had a clear identity. Ministering doesn't even really have a clear identity. And so I have an idea on how to reimagine it, and I'm gonna see if it works.
All right. So, well, I'm excited for the Old Testament.
An update in a year. Oh yeah, for sure. I love the Old Testament. That's
Yeah.
big.
Yeah, it's going to be fun. I love being in a position where we can hear lessons from our Berkeley Ward teachers and that are interesting and insightful. And
Yes.
let's hear some politics and some talks about old timey, ancient Sumeria. Let's get into it, man. I'm excited.
It'll be great. I'm gonna post a link. This is to a tweet I made. My tweet is not the interesting thing. The reason I'm posting my tweet is because it's in the middle of two threads that I think are worth reading. And if you follow my thread, my tweet both forward and backward, you'll find the stuff that I think is interesting. So
on the Old Testament.
On the Old Testament and teaching it, and various methods and tools that you can use if you're a teacher or you just want to do it for yourself.
All right. We're a proud member of the Dialogue Podcasting Network.
We sure are.
We thank Daniel Foster Smith for our music. And we are excited to be with you guys. Thanks for listening.
Toodaloo.